So I just saw Split and I really liked it, but I felt like it kind of had the same problem that Finding Dory did. So I just wanted to talk about themes, and this is a spoiler warning for both movies. Here we go. So in Split, you keep having these frequent flashbacks to the protagonist Casey's childhood. I love stories with flashbacks in an alternate timeline to establish themes. I think it's super literary, you see it more in books than in movies and more in short stories than in books. Anyway, these flashbacks gradually reveal that Casey was molested by her uncle on the family hunting trips. On one occasion, she took a gun and she pointed it at him and she was gonna shoot him, and he was like, "Casey, you don't want to do this. I'm your uncle. I'm a nice guy." He got her to hesitate and then he grabbed the gun away. So then he just kept abusing her whole life. So this haunts her, and it's kind of like a defining moment for her, I think. We're shown over and over again that Casey's really smart and resourceful, but whenever she has an opportunity to act, like running away or attacking or something like that, she just freezes up because she's got this learned helplessness from her childhood. I mean, that's one of the first things we see her doing in the movie. James McAvoy is subduing the other girls with his product placement chloroform spray. This movie was brought to you by Skype, Lindor Truffles, and fast-acting chloroform spray. So his actual targets are the other girls, and there's a couple seconds where Casey, he's just ignoring her, and she probably could have gotten away, but she just freezes up. So I'm already looking for parallels between the Casey flashback story and the present-day story, because flashbacks always happen for a reason. And there's a supernatural element to this story too. They specifically make it so James McAvoy has this one super dangerous personality called the Beast. When he's the Beast, his body physically changes, so he's basically invulnerable. When he's in his other human personalities, he can be hurt or fought or killed. So it's the climax of the movie. Casey's running through the building. She's got her big shotguns, just like that time with her uncle. James McAvoy is chasing her, but if she shoots him while he's the Beast, her gun is basically useless because he's indestructible. I was like, oh, okay. The point is, she's gonna have to somehow, by waiting or saying or doing the right thing, get him to revert to one of his other personas. Probably Hedwig, because he's one of the more sympathetic ones. And then she's gonna have to shoot that one, because James McAvoy is still a threat to her. She's gonna realize that even though he's nice sometimes, the danger that he poses to her is too great, and she's gonna have to defend herself. I was like, oh my god, this makes sense. The whole thing is James McAvoy is a metaphor for abusers. There are different facets to them. Abusers aren't abusers all the time. They can go out and function in society, but then also they're monsters. And sometimes they're nice, usually when they realize you're fed up and you're gonna leave them or fight back. And that's one of several complex reasons that abused people will stay in those kind of relationships. But actually, no, that's not the theme of the movie. Instead, James McAvoy sees that Casey is covered with scars, so she's like him. And he goes, "The broken are more evolved." Did he sound like Bane? I remember him sounding like Bane. And he just decides to leave her alone. So this is a throwback to a line his psychiatrist has earlier in the movie. She's talking to a friend and she goes, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember. People assume the mentally ill are less than the rest of us, but they've actually survived some tough stuff. So they're actually stronger. So that's a cool moral, but it doesn't really apply to either of our broken characters in the film. For example, did the audience really view Casey as broken? I didn't, and the other girls she was with didn't seem to either. They kind of criticized her for not acting, but from the point of view of hey, we don't get where you're coming from here because you're not explaining your actions to us ever. But it's not like they wrote her off as a lost cause. They were still trying to get all of them out. And they did invite her to that birthday party at the beginning. I mean, if the movie ultimately wanted to show Casey's not brokenness, couldn't they have just established that her more passive approach was really effective in its own way? If she's not going to get out by fighting, that's understandable. So maybe she could get out through subtlety and cleverness. We keep seeing the other girls trying to run and fight, and Casey freezes. She shrinks back into a corner. Casey tries to give the other girls advice to prevent sexual assault. It would have been interesting if this knowledge of abuse and how it works had helped Casey survive in her situation, to illustrate the more evolved angle. It seems like it's going in that direction the whole movie, actually. The other girls get locked up in separate closets and they don't don't get to eat. Casey manipulates James McAvoy and gets access to a walkie-talkie. But there at the end, the girls get chomped up by Beast James McAvoy, and Casey almost does too. Ultimately, the only reason Casey survived is she was covered in physical scars, which is not even true of all victims of abuse. If she hadn't had those scars, none of that other stuff she did would have made any difference at all. She would have just died. So it's not really like the broken are more evolved. It's like if you have physical evidence of being broken, then maybe in a really specific circumstance, you will get a get out of jail free card from another broken person. Casey is a survivor, and we like her for that. But the film failed to establish how her surviving past trauma in any way ultimately helped her to survive. Also, even if it had, that's not a very uplifting moral. It's uplifting in the context of James McAvoy, like he survived all this terrible stuff, but he's strong now. But it's not actually uplifting because James McAvoy is a crazy murderer that eats people. And it's definitely not uplifting that Casey got molested her whole childhood just because that eventually made crazy James McAvoy decide not to kill her. Okay, now I'm going to talk about Finding Dory. The moral of Finding Dory was the broken are more evolved. I mean, it was that the injured or handicapped aren't any less able to lead full happy lives. I mean, it actually wasn't anything that was backed up by the material. And it easily could have been. I mean, it had half a moral. I'm going to explain. So when I first saw the trailers for this movie, I actually thought it was going to have an adoption theme. Dory can't find her family, but she has Marlin and Nemo now. Sadness. Happiness. A bittersweet mix of the two. Then from like the first scene, it becomes clear that it's actually about coping with disability. So I was like, oh wow, that's intense. And I was like, oh my god, no. According to the comedic setup from the last movie, Dory's short-term memory loss is so bad, it's like cripplingly horrible. If we're gonna look at it as like a serious disorder and not a comedy device, that's gonna be pretty dark. Like, how are they gonna resolve that in a way that's satisfying? The answer is that they don't. So the whole movie, the present day action is set against flashbacks from Dory's childhood. Oh my god, no, it's not like the ones in Split. It's flashbacks to her childhood where her parents are trying to cope with the idea that she has severe short-term memory loss. It's really tragic. Like, they know they can't take care of her forever, but they don't think she's ever going to be able to take care of herself. They think she'll just immediately get lost and like eaten by something. The movie even sets up the ocean as a handy metaphor for like the real world. Like her parents don't think she can survive out there. So while she's looking for her parents, adult Dory ends up at this marine institute whose slogan is rescue, rehabilitation, release. So they want to send all their able-bodied, capable fish back out into the real world and keep the injured ones there forever, sheltered, because they can't handle it. Like, okay, that seems like it's gonna serve the metaphor pretty well. But in the climactic scene, Dory ends up in this tank of blue tang fish that are gonna get sent inland to another aquarium. And the reason that they're going is that aquarium wants a blue tang exhibit. Dory gets out of the van in time, but Marlin and Nemo are stuck. So now Dory needs to save Marlin and Nemo from the truck. Okay, so hold up. Wouldn't the obvious choice be the fish in the truck are going to the inland aquarium because it's decided that they're too disabled? They are unfit to live in the ocean. And maybe the fish aren't happy about that, so the climax of the film is this van full of so-called disabled fish that need to cleverly work around their perceived weaknesses in order to get into the ocean by working together, proving that they can do things their way and be just as good as other fish. There's like a sneezing fish in the van. He never shows up again, by the way. The tank full of blue tangs are all perfectly healthy fish. Like, they're just going because that one aquarium wants blue fish. And none of the fish even initially seem to mind going to this aquarium. It's only a problem because if Marlin and Nemo go to the aquarium, they'll never see Dory again. And the thing is, the whole time Dory's trying to find her parents, she keeps overcoming her short-term memory loss by just remembering stuff when she needs to. Like, when it's really important that she remembers something, she just does. You can see them trying to establish this idea that Dory has a unique way of thinking that's all her own, and maybe she uses connections to things to pull things back out of her memory after she forgets them. But the way they show that is she goes, which way is the ocean? And then like a seagull flies overhead and she sees it and she goes, oh, a seagull, seagulls go to the ocean's that way. My friends are in, where are my friends? Where are they? And then she hears like a honking truck horn from somewhere conveniently. And she's like, oh, a truck, they're in a truck. So that's not her learning to work through her memory gaps. That's just whenever she needs to remember something, there's conveniently something in her line of sight or immediate surroundings to remind her through no accomplishment of her own. Also, if her memory is lost, then why should a honking truck horn remind her? I mean, basically what I'm getting at is there are no established rules. She just remembers what she needs to remember, always. It's similar with her beluga whale friend. He's at the institute because he can't echolocate. And then later, Dory is stuck in some pipes and she might die. She needs someone to echolocate for her. And then he like thinks really hard and he's like, oh, I can do it. So he didn't learn to live with his disability, he just found out he didn't have it. The octopus has PTSD, but when his friends need him, he becomes brave. There's a whale shark who's nearsighted, and she ends up figuring out that she can like enlist one of her friends to be a seeing eye whale, and then she can swim fast without running into things. And that was the one instance of like a clever solution to their disability. And so that one gets points, but that's the only one. But none of the other fish in this movie learn to cope with their disability. They all just find out that when they need to really not be disabled, they just aren't anymore. At the end of the movie, it's like Dory's journey was only successful because fortunately, at all the times she really needed to remember stuff, she did. And thank God for that. But it wasn't really a story about learning to overcome the challenges of disability or even finding a reliable workaround for her. It was really just finding out that at the end of the day, she really only has short-term memory loss, like, sometimes. Oh, also in Finding Nemo, they had that whole subplot where Nemo has that deformed fin, and it makes Marlin believe that he can't do things like the other fish can. And then at the end of the movie, Marlin learns that Nemo's as capable as the other fish, and he needs to just let him go out into the world and live his life. Yeah, it's almost like it didn't make sense to do this whole story again. It's kind of weird that Marlin had to learn the exact same lesson again, but this time with his adult friend. Anyway, my point is that Split and Finding Dory are the same movie. My friend and I were laughing when James McAvoy is like, honey, you have to get that shotgun. I'm gonna turn into a monster again soon. Cause like, we wanted Casey to be like, is there something else I can kill you with? I have emotional baggage about specifically that kind of gun. Like, that's really bad luck. Casey just can't catch a break.